This is a deep story. Y'all better get your tea out for this one. Did you know that the homelessness rate jumped over the last couple of years? You remember how everybody was talking about it was like 530,000? That's old numbers. We're 630,000 plus now in homeless people that are out on the street. When you think of people who are unhoused, what first comes into your mind? Do you think lacks ambition, does drugs, lazy? Is that what your initial thoughts are? Or do you see them as victims of a system that they did the best they could within this system, but because of the way the system operates, they couldn't make it? And it's not that the system is easy to operate through. It's actually arduous. But the problem is that with that system, it needs and requires people to be homeless so that they prove to be time and time again the examples so that we continuously keep working for starvation wages so that we'll accept whatever the employers, aka capitalists, give us. There is an article recently that came out that is talking about criminalizing homelessness. And I think this is deeply important because the criminalization of homelessness is actually about to explode from the US Supreme Court. So they're going to be they're essentially going to be deciding whether cities can further criminalize homelessness or not. I want to share, let me see. Oh, I know what to do. I'm going to share this really quick. It's something that I want to read. Let's see here. All right. Let me take a look. Yeah, here we go. Perfection. I All right. So let me share my screen really quick. Sorry, a little bit of time to load. My apologies. We're live, folks. Let's continue here. All right. I love this page. This page is awesome. And if you guys haven't, if you guys have an Instagram, I should say, then you should follow the Invisible People. This is a wonderful page to follow where it really humanizes our unhoused neighbors. But let's read this. Well, listen.
Supreme Court is about to make it illegal to have a blanket on the street, completely criminalizing homelessness. Here's everything you need to know in 60 seconds. Grants Pass is a small Oregon town of 40,000. Like many places in the U.S., they're grappling with a significant housing crisis and a growing number of homeless people. Now, here's where things get a bit wild. Grants Pass passed a law banning homeless people from using blankets, pillows, or even cardboard to keep warm. Crazy, right? But guess what? There's more. The town's only shelter, it's a gospel rescue mission. And guess what? It not only requires folks to participate in religious programs, but it also asks for a $100 monthly fee. And like many other cities, Grants Pass is struggling to provide enough support services for its homeless population, especially low barrier services for those that need it the most. But here's the twist. An earlier court said nope to that. Their take? If there's no shelter bed, you can't punish someone for trying to survive. Now this whole thing's hitting the Supreme Court. The big surprise? It's not just Grants Pass. Big names like San Francisco Mayor London Breed, Governor Gavin Newsom are in on this. They're part of this group that's all about criminalizing homelessness instead of backing solutions that actually work. This is huge because it's the first major homelessness case the Supreme Court has tackled since the 80s. And guess what? Criminalizing homelessness, it only makes things worse. Bottom line, it's homes and support, not handcuffs, that solve this crisis. Criminalization will make encampments grow. Housing with support services like treatment is the only permanent solution to reducing homelessness. The Supreme
So ultimately, as we can see, that's what we have going on right now. So let's get into the article because this is very important. So let me get the article for you guys. Okay. And let's go here. Okay. So it says the Supreme Court is on the verge of criminalizing homelessness. So let me make sure this is big enough so that everybody can read. It says as the High Court deliberates, policymakers are preparing for the possibility that they might solve a problem they created in the most punitive way. It's about to get deep, folks. Let's go. Come on. Sorry, let me refresh. Okay. All right, here we go. All right, perfect. All right, so it says, since the onset of the C-19 pandemic, advocates and policy analysts have warned of homelessness tsunami. It is the worst case scenario where the combination of lost income, backlogs of owed rent, and lack of local government foresight contribute to the surge of people losing housing and ending up on the streets. Well, it has arrived, and it is poised to get much worse at the Supreme Court is set to decide whether to make homelessness a de facto crime. says this past month, many cities and counties conducted an annual point-in-time homelessness counts. The results of January's counts won't be known for several months, but they are likely to be dire. The end of 2023 results found that approximately 653,000 people were experiencing homelessness. That's up more than 70,000 over 2022, or a 12% increase. In the 12 months since that data was collected, those numbers have likely gone up. Remember what I said earlier about how many people that we all have that jam in our brain? Oh, it's about 530,000. No, over 650,000 so far. The homelessness rate is increasing. It is jumping. It is skyrocketing right now. A lot of us cannot afford our rent. A lot of us cannot afford our bills. A lot of us cannot afford to maintain even just a simple lifestyle. You, me, everybody, we are all suffering. And it's every single one of you are within a hair's breadth of being homeless. I don't care if you're making six figures. I don't care if you're making 100, 150, maybe even close to $200,000 a year. You are still way closer to poverty than these oligarchs ever will be. And all it takes is for one event to happen, and you are homeless. And this is why this is important to every single one of you that are watching and within the sound of my voice. Because if in case this unsightly and dire circumstance befalls you, if it does, you are deemed a criminal by the state. I want that to be very abundantly clear to everybody that's watching. If in case somehow you become homeless, let's say illness befalls you, or financial circumstances, or something happens, and then you become homeless, you are now, if the Supreme Court decides this, you will be deemed as a criminal by the state. Are you paying attention? By the way, the people who are homeless aren't just people who are out on the street. I also want to make that abundantly clear too. You got somebody sleeping on your couch? They're homeless. You got somebody sleeping in a motel? They're homeless. And by motel, I mean they're sleeping there under duress. It's not by choice. People in shelters? Homeless. People sleeping in their cars? Homeless. So there's a lot of people that are homeless that don't get counted among that 650,000, which means that our homeless rate is actually higher than what is being counted. Just because you got a family member sleeping in your living room does not mean, or sleeping in your basement does not mean they're not homeless. They are. And some of y'all that are making $60,000, $70,000 a year, and you don't think you're close to homeless, oh baby, oh my sweet summer child, you are very, very close to it. That's why this is dangerous. Let's continue. But the raw numbers are just the tip of the iceberg. As more people end up experiencing homelessness, they are also facing increasingly punitive and reactionary responses from local governments and their neighbors. Such policies could become legally codified in short order, with the High Court having agreed to hear arguments of Grants Pass versus Johnson. Originally brought in 2018, the case challenged the city of Grants Pass, Oregon, over an ordinance banning camping. Both a federal judge and later a panel from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals struck the law down, saying that Grants Pass did not have enough available shelter to offer homeless people. As such, the law was deemed to be in violation of the Eighth Amendment. The ruling backed up the Ninth Circuit's earlier ruling in the Martin versus City of Boise case, which said that punishing or arresting people for camping in public when there are no available shelter beds to take them to instead constituted a violation of the cruel and unusual punishment clause in the Eighth Amendment. That applied to localities in the Ninth Circuit's area of concern and has led to greater legal scrutiny, even as cities and countries push for more punitive and restrictive anti-camping laws. In fact, Grants Pass pushed to get the Supreme Court to hear the case, and several nominally liberal cities and states on the West Coast are backing its argument. So, when liberals say, oh, we actually care about the homeless, y'all ain't prove it. Y'all ain't show me. Because what I'm looking at is y'all just as hostile to the homeless as the conservatives are, right? Say housing is a human right around a liberal and see what happens. Now, granted, some liberals, they do not feel that way, and that's fine. But what if you start proposing things like housing first or housing for all to them? How do they react? Do they react in a way where, well, I think that'll be nice, if we can actually do it? Or would it be, well, why should we give housing to people who hasn't worked for it? Why do we allow people who have exploited people who are workers to have multiple houses when they can only live in one house at a time? True freedom does not allow you to encroach upon the rights of others. So, yeah, you may have multiple houses, which gives you that freedom. But at the same time, what about the freedom of people to be housed? The problem is that they have none, and then you have 3, 4, 5 houses. How is that true freedom? Because the thing is that, yes, you have those houses, but what about them? And the thing is that you literally live in a system where people who, you have to have poor and unhoused people in order to maintain this system. Is that true freedom? Because now you're subjecting a huge group of people to the elements, to being sick, to die within that. Let me continue, because if I go on a rant, this stream will be 4 damn hours. Anyway. It continues. If the Supreme Court overturns the previous Grants Pass and Boise rulings, it would open the door for cities, states, and counties to essentially criminalize being unhoused on a massive scale. If it does so, it will have ramifications for all unhoused people, from those who have been chronically homeless for some time to those currently falling into homelessness. And that last category is a large one. In the last time since January 2023 homeless count, there have been at least 1,076,396 evictions across 10 states and 34 cities, according to Princeton University's Eviction Lab project, which tracked data related to evictions through the end of 2023. In December alone, there were more than 69,000 evictions in those monitored areas. According to the data, evictions have almost fully returned to pre-COVID pandemic levels after federal moratoriums and protections expired. Here's another point. It says it's also become harder to pay for housing. The housing market remains tight for anyone looking to buy, and renters are losing options. Inflation has eaten into people's available income. Pandemic era protections have ended. Rents are rising. The data from the Harvard Joint Center of Housing Studies that came out last month showed that renters are spending more, even as the amount of affordable housing is decreasing. Let me share something with you guys really quick, because I share this all the time whenever I can, because this is very important. Shout out to Roger Meadows for putting this together, but this is necessary. This basically shows how much you need to make in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in different parts of the United States. I'm going to start off with my state first, Florida. Let me enlarge this. Let me see. Oop. You guys can see that, right? Let me see. Hang on. Fit the page. Let's do 75. Oh, that's too big. That's what she said. Okay, that's good. So in Florida, you need to make $30.59 per hour in order to be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Some of the most expensive areas are Monroe County, Miami Beach, Kendall, West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and Naples. You need to work 92 hours a week at minimum wage to afford a 1-bedroom. Now, that figure probably changed a little bit since then. And why do I say it probably changed a little bit since then? Well, because back in 2020, we actually passed a law that, and it was a ballot initiative that increases the minimum wage, the state minimum wage in Florida, to $15 an hour by 2026. And so back in September, it increased to $12 an hour. And so by the time we hit 2026, it'll be $15 an hour, and then it will adjust to inflation after that. But with that being said, if you look at the price, $30.59 an hour, that's more than double than what is required. That's more than double than the state minimum wage. So it is impossible to really afford a place in the state of Florida, right? Renters are hurting. Let's get out of Florida. Let's go to another state, right? Let's go to Michigan. I want to go to Michigan. Let's take a look at Michigan. In Michigan, you need to make $21.65 per hour. So you have to make over $20 an hour in Michigan. You have to work over 68 hours a week in order to be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Michigan. The most expensive areas are Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, Livingston, Detroit, and Holland. We're just going over these. Let's go to Colorado. Colorado, you need to make $32.13 an hour. Most expensive places are Eagle County, Boulder, Pitkin, Summit, and Denver, Aurora. Let's go to Texas. Texas, you need to make $25.06 an hour. You need to work 116 hours a week. 116 hours a week just to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Texas. Most expensive areas are Austin, Dallas, Kendall, Fort Worth, Midland. Let's go North Carolina. You need to make $21.54 an hour. You have to work 102 hours just to afford a 2-bedroom. Most expensive areas are Asheville, Raleigh, Charlotte, Currituck, and Durham, Chapel Hill. Now, I didn't go to New York or California or Illinois. Didn't need to. And so when we say that people are suffering, the people are suffering. The federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. Let me continue on this. This is just wild, man. I'm telling you. It says nearly 22.4 million households, or half of all renters, can't afford their rent. According to an accepted standard that paying more than 30% of one's income on rent renders it unaffordable without immediate assistance to renters, it is a situation that will only worsen. Back rent due, as well as new rent increases, is likely to magnify the financial strain that's already being keenly felt by renters, forcing more people out of their homes, either to depend on friends and family or to end up on the streets. You guys want to know a secret? I'm one of those people. More than 50% of my income, or the household income that I live in, goes towards rent. I'm struggling. Don't get it twisted. You got some people who are on YouTube, and other platforms out here that are making good money. Not me, not I. And the thing is that, and people will think, well, RBN got money because they got over 40-something thousand subs. We ain't making that much money. And the thing is that ultimately, because this is a labor of love, right? But the issue is that there are a lot of us that are suffering. And the thing is that we get it. The only reason why we didn't have to pay more in our electric is because we didn't have to operate the air conditioner. Thank God, because I had to do laundry yesterday. So there's a lot of us that just cannot afford it. A lot of you guys that are watching right now, y'all are having trouble affording your rent. So the Supreme Court sides with Grant's pass, it would effectively undo all the protections created by the Boyce case, which means that the thousands of people currently experiencing homelessness, as well as those who are likely to fall into homelessness in 2024, will face additional challenges in an already traumatic situation. Added legal and financial burdens will only make it harder for them to become rehoused, creating a vicious cycle of escalating misery that will do nothing to actually solve the underlying cause of homelessness. Do you hear me now? If you get arrested and criminalized, jail because of homelessness, guess what? That's going to be on your record. And if that's on your record, good luck being able to find housing after that. Good luck being able to find a job because you got a record. All because you fell on hard times and you couldn't afford housing. See how this operates? See how the vicious cycle operates? And then if you've been arrested enough times, they're going to be like, well, just throw them in prison. And the prison industrial complex, look, let's talk about Angola State Prison in Louisiana. Louisiana State Prison in Angola. If you look there, they're literally doing slave labor there. So guess what? If you can't pay enough to live and be housed, then guess what? You're gonna be unhoused, which means they're gonna criminalize it. You get arrested for being unhoused. Then you go to jail. You have a arrest record, which means that it's going to make you much harder to get housing, much harder to also get a job, which means you're going to stay unhoused, which means you're going to get arrested repeatedly, which means you may end up, because of multiple offenses, get placed into prison. Once you get placed into prison, then guess what? You're going to have to work for free or nearly free, which means that you become a slave. Because as we all know, within the great country of the United States, slavery was never fully abolished. And do not come in here and talk about, oh, well, if you just follow the rules, then maybe you wouldn't have. No, 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 no. Stop making excuses for slavery. Do not make no excuses for it. You're making excuses for chattel slavery by saying, oh, well, if you just follow the rules. We're not going to do that. And so the thing is that this is just a vicious cycle that puts more people into slavery. And it's not only just affecting people, like it'll disproportionately affect people that look like me, but it's also going to affect a ton of white people too. Grants Pass versus Johnson hasn't received the same fanfare as many of the other cases before the Supreme Court this term. But perhaps no other case has as much at stake for some of the most vulnerable Americans who now face the prospect of both additional financial burdens and the possibility of being transformed into a new class of criminal, solely because many states and municipalities have chosen to wash their hands of a crisis their own policies have created. So this is what we're dealing with. And this is supposed to be, I think, a case heard in June. Now, just think about that. Think about your family members that may be unhoused, your friends. Think about all the people out there who are unhoused. Now, here in Orlando, a new city ordinance was passed not too long ago. And I'm going to read it to you guys. And shout out to Real Orlando for the work that they're doing on the ground. They are talking about the unhoused, the ordinance that they placed there. And there's an area not too far from me. It is the Paramore Avenue area where there's a lot of homelessness. Paramore, Terry Avenue, Central Boulevard. And when we at Orlando RBN, when we as a chapter were doing our first action, we came across Terry Avenue and there was a homeless camp there. That homeless camp is gone. OPD removed it. And you have the Coalition of the Homeless, you have the SALT coalition over there. And where do the homeless people have to go? Right? And I'm going to talk to you guys about homeless shelters because everybody thinks, well, homeless shelter is the answer. It's not that simple. But here's the ordinance here, right? This is City Ordinance 2023-55. It says an ordinance of the City of Orlando, Florida, relating to disorderly conduct, amending Chapter 43, Section 43.06 of the Code of the City of Orlando, Florida, prohibiting the intentional blockage of sidewalks, providing for severability, providing for codification, correction of Scrivener's errors, and effective date. So it says Section 43.06, disorderly conduct, commission of the following acts constitute disorderly conduct. It says any person who walks, stands, sits, lies, or places an object in such a manner as to intentionally block passage by another person or require another person to take evasive action to avoid physical contact, or who, after being ordered to move by law enforcement officers, remains in or on any public street or sidewalk in such a manner as to block or impair movement of vehicles or pedestrians. Basically, what this means is that, let's say I'm homeless and I put up a tent on a sidewalk. If you have to move out of the way in order to walk around my tent, or let's say I'm sleeping and I have a blanket on me and you have to kind of move out of the way in order to avoid walking on top of me while I'm sleeping on the sidewalk, then that means that OPD, Orlando Police Department, literally has full reign to arrest you according to this ordinance. And that is what some of these laws are. This also means that if you are doing civil disobedience, let's say hypothetically protesting the genocide in Gaza, that means also the city can also arrest you for expressing your First Amendment right. With that being said, then these anti-homeless laws that are constantly being pushed out really are just an out of sight, out of mind type of policy, because they do not want to see homeless people on the street, because then that reminds them of the system and how terrible it really is. And this is what they're doing here in Orlando. No doubt they're doing it in many different cities. And it's not just relegated to red states or blue states. No, no, no. It's in all these states, because they all follow the trend that the corporate class wants you to follow. That's what's going on here in Orlando. Now, there's an issue regarding a lot of homeless shelters. Story time. There once was a little boy named JB. JB was 3 years old. And when I was 3, when we first moved down here to Florida, a friend of ours decided to move back up to Jersey. That left us, myself, my brothers, and my mother, homeless in Orlando. We had to go to a homeless shelter around the same area, right, near Terry Avenue. And because it was cold out, what mother wants to take her kids and walk the streets when it's cold out? No mom wants to do that. But they forced my mother to take her and her 3 boys and go out into the street, because they didn't want her to stay there, because they wanted to force her to look for a job. So here we are, walking the streets of Orlando, and what was it, December, January, where it was pretty cold. Because after we get breakfast, we can't stay there. You have to walk the streets. And that's how we were treated. You have a woman with an 11-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. So as a child, I know what it's like to be unhoused. That's why this matters so much to me. And let's not forget the fact that some homeless shelters have arbitrary rules, draconian at best. So let me share this with you guys too, because I think this is important. And this gentleman is going to explain some of the troubles with shelters. I was trying to look for another one because he gives a little bit more of a nuanced detail, but this one works too. So let's hear what he has to say. Let me make sure. All right.
They're so wonderful. Not. You have to check them out yourself, and you'll see quite different. You know, you go to regular shelters, and there's people that stay awake all night fighting. All they want to talk about is drugs. All they do is steal from people that are asleep, and so nobody wants to sleep in these shelters. But then everyone's always saying, you should be in a shelter. Bad on you for not doing that. Well, you can't. It's not a good place for a lot of people. The navigation centers, there's a lot of hope there, or used to be. And now it's just so much red tape in there. You get in there for a week, and they kick you right back out. They're not helping anything.
So when people say, oh, we'll just go to a shelter, it's not that easy. Also, do you have a lot of religious shelters that they will require you to do their religious practice, particularly most of the shelters that we encounter are Christian. And so you have to engage in their Christian practice in order to be able to be housed. And what if you're atheist? What if you're Muslim? What if you're Hindu? What if you're Wiccan? Who knows? It doesn't matter. But that's a requirement that you have to sit through their Bible study, or you have to sit through their church service in order to have shelter. So you have to conform to their religion in order to receive help. Never mind the fact that there are allegedly claims that Salvation Army charges a fee to homeless people to stay at their shelter. You're homeless. You ain't got no money. So now you mean I have to panhandle just to be able to stay at a shelter? Whereas it's supposed to be free for me to stay so that I can get on my feet? One of the things I think that's important is we need what I like to that is said is a housing first program. Finland actually does housing first. Now, they're not the only one that does housing first, but as far as developed countries go, Finland is also doing it. Okay.
Invisible people travel to.
All right, so let's share.
Homelessness.
RV after RV parked here because people have nowhere else to go.
New data shows that homelessness in the United States is at an all-time high.
But there's one country that has redefined how nations can tackle homelessness. Finland is one of the only countries in the world to significantly decrease homelessness. Invisible people traveled to Helsinki to investigate.
I was walking areas in the city. If it was America, you would have seen countless homeless people.
With the leaders who made it happen.
The worse the situation is, the more important it is that you at least start a change.
Citizens living in housing first units.
Is your life better now in housing?
I don't want to lie. It's not.
And everything is better when I live here.
And the staff that supports them.
A person needs a home, so the other stuff can happen.
You can never get so low that we will not be beside you.
Housing first comes from USA.
We changed the systems completely. We went all in with the housing first.
And same time, this kind of camps disappeared.
In America, people don't want to give housing to homeless people. What would you say to them?
She would say that it saved her life and it will save others' lives too. And so that's why housing first is so great, because otherwise she might be dead.
How has her life changed in housing?
No, mä oon lopettanut kaman käytön.
She doesn't use drugs anymore, and that's quite big.
Töitä.
Work.
Oma rytmi.
There's a rhythm in life.
Normaali, miten se sanotaan, normaali elämä.
Normal life, which is what she wanted.
What's the favorite part of your apartment?
Sänky. Seuraava on keittiö.
Bed and the kitchen.
What is homelessness like in Finland?
Pahalta.
Very bad.
Pelottaa.
And it was very scary.
Täällä on kylmät talvet.
So first of all, one of the things that I want to say is when a lot of people talk about, oh my God, they just need to get off of drugs. First of all, not everybody that is homeless becomes homeless because of drug use. Some people just fall on hard times. Number one. Number two, some people get addicted to drugs because they're homeless. So therefore, the homelessness causes the drug addiction. Also, I'm gonna get real and raw with y'all for a second. I hope that I can keep this as tame as I can for the tube, because I'm about to get raw and real here for a second. But when you're homeless, you have to watch out for people that may end up taking your stuff or doing things to you while you're out there on the street. You have to be careful. With that being said, you might have to be alert during the evening. And you might have to take something that keeps you awake during the evenings so that you stay safe and alert. If you catch my drift. So therefore, it is done out of desperation and duress. On top of it, then the addiction also comes in, which in itself is a health hazard. Then on top of it, in order to be able to survive, then you may have to try to sleep out on the streets. You don't get any sleep. You have to sleep on extremely hard surfaces like concrete and on benches and whatnot, if they don't have the anti-homeless structure that they typically put in place. So that's why some people become addicted. And by the way, just because some people have an addiction to certain hard drugs doesn't make them less of a person than you. Because guaranteed, some of y'all are addicted to drugs right now, and it's widely accepted. Some of y'all can't operate without a cup of coffee this morning. And it's okay to have a caffeine addiction. Some of y'all need that beer at the end of the night or that glass of wine. And some of y'all are so addicted to sugar that you guys keep a bowl of candy near you at all times, feeding your addiction. So you're no better. You're no better. None of us are. None of us. So if there's anybody who feels that they're better than somebody that's homeless, get off your high horse and see these people, see yourself in them. Because they are your neighbors. They are our neighbors. They are our fellow human beings. You are no better than them. Heard? Let's continue.
Winters are cold.
Yeah.
And they are long.
Homeless as hell in Finland because you'll be real cold, real wet.
Not very nice. But where is it nice?
1990s, we still have 20,000 homeless people. And of course, at some point, there was a real struggle that there were many people sleeping on the streets. And you know, because the winters are really harsh here in Finland, they would also die on the streets. So I think that was a really the wake-up call that we need to do something and change the policies quite slowly. And then we get the rapid phase when we start the Housing First 2008.
That's when they went all in on Housing First. They renovated almost all of the shelters into Housing First buildings to give homeless people their own individual apartment. They also built more affordable housing across the country, and it seems to have...
In 5 years, we both created the program and halved the long-term homelessness in Finland.
Homelessness in Finland has changed quite dramatically since 2008. For example, in the city of Helsinki, which is the capital city, you will not see tents, sleeping bags, or rough sleepers whatsoever. We want to end homelessness, or we want to end rough sleeping. I think, you know, some people would have laughed at us that, you know, that's not possible ever. But, you know, I think we have proved them wrong.
So it feels like the best way to end homelessness is by giving people homes. You see, a lot of people would say, well, if you give them homes, that they didn't work for it. You didn't work for them roads that you drive on every single day, and yet they're still provided for you. I didn't see you out there pouring asphalt and tar onto the ground and then getting on a steamroller and rolling your own roads, did I? I personally don't have kids, but why should my money, hard-earned money, go to these little rats so that they can get themselves an education? Why? Because I indirectly benefit from these kids getting an education, even though I don't have kids. Because when they grow up and they get an education and I need them for different services, then guess who gets to use those services? Me! That's how society works. So we are all indirectly harmed by homelessness. Because any one of these people could be somebody that can help you out in the future, but they can't if they're constantly under duress and suffering from homelessness.
We spent days on our own in Helsinki looking for homeless people, and we couldn't find them. It was surreal. So, are there really none left? Juha told us this isn't a visible phenomenon, so we needed to go inside to find them.
So welcome to our organizational fixed abode. You enter to our day center Vepa, where people who are sleeping rough, they can come here. And this is kind of living room. We serve every day a warm meal, mainly the peer support and also the professional guidance how to find apartment. The Housing First started in our organization, and we are still running the first Housing First unit, Sallikoti, here in Finland.
How does this connect with the city services?
Our functions are separated from the city services. We do lots of collaboration with the city who are doing the outreach work, come here in regular basis, and we share information and kind of like what is going on with people who are sleeping rough.
Onko kaikki ihan ok? Ei mitään hätää, ei tarvitse meidän takia nousta. Hello, I'm doing street work in streets of Helsinki. I want to invite you to see outreach work. So people who are walking their dogs and walking around, if they find tents, they maybe make a call. Sometimes we find a new one, get informed for a new place. Yeah, it's really under a bridge. Of course, it's so different before 2010 because there was so much people rough sleeping in this kind of tent camps. 2010 and 2013 have built many new places, and same time this kind of camps disappeared.
Housing First is an idea where people have their own rental contracts and own homes, and they also get support in the housing. Earlier, it was like that you had to kind of like earn to get a house. You had to like rehabilitate from abuse problems and things like that.
But the Finnish people let one important truth guide their policy.
It's kind of impossible to rehabilitate from the streets. So a person needs a home. So the other stuff can happen after that. Everyone needs a home. We try to make sure that everyone gets that opportunity.
And that sounds incredible, but we wondered, how can Finland possibly keep up with the demand?
So one of the things that I think a lot of people don't regard is that instead of making the housing the end all be all and the mark of achievement, housing has to be the beginning, the very foundation, right? Where you go, people need shelter and structure first, and then all the other things compound, so that if they're all addicted to any substances, they can get off of those, because now they don't have to worry about not having, they don't have to worry about their surroundings, their belongings, being able to survive. That stress is gone. Also, by the way, I forgot to mention it. You know what is a gateway drug? Trauma. You don't think those people who are out in these streets that are unhoused, you don't think they're not suffering trauma every single day? They're suffering trauma all the time. That's one of the biggest gateway drugs. You get rid of that trauma. Hell, just for a second, I want you to think about this. How would you feel if you realized you can never go homeless? How would that make you feel? Wouldn't there be a weight lifted off your shoulders? Wouldn't that be amazing? Imagine the weight that's lifted off the shoulders of our unhoused neighbors if they realize that they now have housing just by virtue of being a human being. That's what it means. And we should get ourselves to a point where you don't lose your house at all. Because, excuse me, because housing in itself is a right in a civilized society. So I'm not going to watch this entire video. This video is very good, and I put it in the chat for everybody. But I really want to focus on humanizing our unhoused neighbors, because I think that's also deeply important as well. Because a lot of times what we do is we see them as other, we see them as outside, right? And then we're going to go over some of the things that we can do as a solution to help our unhoused neighbors. Deal? All right, so I want us to humanize our houseless neighbors and see them, see ourselves within them. So we're going to start off with this gentleman here.
Mike, we're here in Denver. You're 20 and you're sleeping outside. Tell me about it.
It is what it is. I mean, you do what you got to do. I just find a pretty warm spot to sleep. Pretty much. That's just about it.
I mean, you shouldn't have to live like that.
I mean, nobody does, but I mean, you gotta, I mean, sometimes you just gotta make ends meet the best way you can if you don't have immediate cash. So, yeah.
How long have you been out on the streets?
about 2 years. So, yeah.
What happened? How'd you end up?
Left home. Basically, had to go elsewhere. Yeah. So
it was time to leave, and there's no place to go.
Yeah, not really immediate. Not rather, yeah. So I didn't really have a lot of options when I first got kicked out. So, you know, stayed at a few friend's house, couch surfed a little bit, then finally had to start going outside because I didn't have too many options there. So
people don't know that couch surfing's not easy.
It's really not that easy. No, it's not, because you got to have a good relationship with the people that you're with in order for them to let you stay there.
So what's your future like?
Well, from what I'm trying to get to right now in schooling wise is college. After I finish my last 2 tests of GED, and then after that, I'll be set to just basically know how to get my career started. But while I'm doing that,
Mike.
That's one. Another one.
Last night I washed my hair in South Station bathroom. I put my makeup on outside of Copley today to try to put up an appearance so that I could spend money to get food. And that's pretty much what I do, is ask people if they can help me out. And there are a lot of nice people out here who have helped out a lot. And then there are people that, you know, they just look at you like you have a disease, you know. Which I do. I mean, I have the disease of addiction and I fight it every day. And it's really difficult not to want to drink and use drugs because I'm homeless and I have no options right now. And I have no support from anybody, so it makes it hard.
You said you had 5 years sober and then you lost your job in your apartment.
Yep.
And ended back out on the streets.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It's difficult. It's hard. It's hard work all day, every day. You're outside all day, you know. You don't have a warm place to be during the day. And then at night, you know, it makes it just really, I don't know, it makes it hard because then you have to try to find a bed somewhere. And this right here is even embarrassing right now because everybody's walking by staring at me, wondering why I'm looking into a camera telling my life story. But
because you're a star.
I don't know about that, but thank you. I appreciate all your help.
If you had 3 wishes, what would they be?
Oh my God, please, I can't do this. I would. Last night I washed my hair in South Station bathroom.
Well, my plight is I was a carpenter. I had my own business doing remodeling. I was associate at a church 21 years. And then people quit paying me in order that I could pay my bills. And then all of a sudden everything was taken from me. My house was taken, books that I had accrued over the years, my jazz albums, all of that was taken. Had vehicles was taken also. I dropped out of college. I was in college studying political science. I wanted to be a congressman so I could change the world, but I found you have to lick so much derriere in order to be a part of it. You have to make deals that you wouldn't normally want to make, so it diminishes your heart and your beliefs and your trust. But the Constitution said we have the pursuit of happiness. Homeless people don't have no pursuit of happiness. They said we're supposed to have justice, but we don't get no justice. Yeah, we're just in jail if we stay here long enough. But I don't even have a problem with that. I'm just trying to find some place that we can lay our head and don't have to get up and rush and run from nowhere. That's one of the biggest things, having rest. Yeah. They try to continually upset our spirits. Yeah. They try to frighten us all the time about you're going to either go to jail or you're going to, lose all your stuff. Oh, I know. But I lost all my stuff. Right. I lost books that were so valuable that it's intense. I don't believe I'll ever get one. One by Richard Wright, you can work wonders with. But my plight is I was
Hi.
Yes.
We're here in Portland, Oregon. You're homeless. Tell me about it.
Okay, so when I was 13, my mom kicked me out. Well, it wasn't really my mom, it was my foster mom. And she kicked me out, so I've been traveling and living in the forest ever since.
And you're 19 now, you
Yep.
said. You've been homeless how long?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
How do you survive?
I crash with friends. I just do whatever.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I can't imagine being out here. You're 13, 14 years old, homeless.
Yeah, I haven't been in Portland all my life. I was born in Oakland.
So what are you doing to trying to get out of homelessness?
Nothing, really. There's not much I can do at this point. I'm just trying to get out of Oregon.
Where'd you sleep last night?
I slept under a bridge.
Oh my gosh. If you had 3 wishes, what would they be?
One to like get out of here. Just go live in the forest, I guess.
And then the others?
I don't know.
So I've been in a lot of foster homes, group homes, placement shelters. You know.
So were you obviously you're in foster homes growing up before you're 21?
Right.
How many placements?
I'd say about 5.
Did foster home affect you at all?
It did. It did. I went through a lot of experience being in foster home placements, and group homes. Medication, forced medicated, restrained, cut my wrists. Excuse me. I was diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenic, suicidal, and mood swings. So I'm hooked up with MBI, and I go to Holy Healthcare to see therapists twice a week.
So you're getting some outpatient health care.
Right.
But without housing.
Yeah, without housing, it's like it's a more burden on your back. It's like, where would I shower? Where would I store my clothes? Where would I store my food? How would I get money to travel? Or, you know, things like that nature. You know, how would I get money to get my ID or my birth, lose it? Things like that. You know, just the comfortability of having a house or a place to stay with 4 walls, a roof, and, you know, some windows and a door to call home and be safe, or, you know, come home and be like, okay, well, this is my domain. I can act how I want. I can be who I want to be and stuff like that. So, but without that, you're sharing your whole life with sidewalk people. So I've been in a lot of foster homes, group homes, placement shelters.
You're 19 years old living in a tent city. Tell me about it.
The only problems I have is just, you know, being cold and just not being used to it, because I've been in the house all my life. And it kind of feels, sometimes I feel like there's unfair like blockage for me not getting an apartment, not getting a job.
You're living out here homeless, going to college. Now, how long have you been going to college school?
Since August 20th, since it started.
Awesome. And what are you taking?
I'm taking English and music.
Awesome. Great. Do you play an instrument?
No, but next semester I'm starting to play the piano.
You're 19 years old living in a tent city. Tell me about it.
The only problems I have is just, you know, being cold.
Even college students that are homeless. And another variable that I wanted to bring out to people is sometimes we'll look at people who are homeless and we'll say, well, they must have did something wrong. Well, let's take a look at this. LGBTQ youth are overrepresented among young people experiencing homelessness and housing instability in the United States. The elevated risk of homelessness and housing instability has detrimental effects on LGBTQ youth's mental health. This report uses data from the 2021 National Survey on LGBTQ youth mental health to examine the prevalence of homelessness and various manifestations of housing instability among LGBTQ youth and their mental health symptoms. It also examines rates of homelessness and housing instability among various subgroups within the LGBTQ community and the prevalence of experiences which are frequently connected to housing instability, example, food insecurity. Finally, it includes recommendations for preventing and combating LGBTQ youth homelessness. Overall, 28% of LGBTQ youth reported experiencing homelessness or housing instability at some point in their lives. Nearly half, 44% of Native Indigenous LGBTQ youth have experienced homelessness or housing instability at some point in their life, compared to 16% of Asian American Pacific Islander youth, 27% of white LGBTQ youth, or 27% of Latina LGBT youth, and 26% of Black LGBT youth, and 36% of multiracial LGBTQ youth. Homelessness and housing instability were reported at higher rates amongst transgender and non-binary youth, including 38% of transgender girls and women, and 39% of transgender boys and men, and 35% of non-binary youth, compared to 23% of cisgender LGBTQ youth. So this is another variable. Those of us that are queer, LGBTQ, we also are thrown out, put out into the street. Why? Just because of who we are. So do not forget that variable as well. And when people say, well, identity and class don't mix, yes, they do. It does also have a bearing too. And many of us are proof of that. Not only do I want to follow the example of places like Finland, but I also want to follow places like Cuba. Cuba also gives housing as a human right. No matter what other people say, people may say, oh my God, it's a dictatorship. What dictatorship ends homelessness? This is from Workers' World. It says, Portland, Oregon. I work at this congregate shelter for people experiencing homelessness in Portland, Oregon, where the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development considers 5,228 people homeless. Of those, 3,057 are unsheltered in Multnomah County alone. My experience in working there has shown me that there's limited cooperation between homeless outreach programs and social service agencies, so the bureaucratic financial mesh strangles the efficiency of getting people into housing through case management. So, he says, it was a refreshing surprise to travel to Cuba in January as part of the 51st contingent of the Venceremos Brigade, which made up 73 delegates from across the United States, which made a trip to show solidarity with the revolutionary island. We exchanged political ideas and with Cubans and willingly gave our voluntary labor in support of the Cuban Revolution. During our stay here, we spent much time traveling both Santiago de Cuba and Camagüey, the second and third most populous cities after Havana. While traveling or walking at night through different streets and alleys of the cities, I never saw anyone who was visibly houseless, but I saw one or two people who seemed a bit lost, who have been dealing with some level of distress. I saw a few people in central squares asking for money, but I never saw a tent or a sleeping bag. I was so curious about where the homeless was in Cuba. If so, how is it handled? So I asked 3 Cubans who work for the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the Peoples, ICAP, who accompanied us, and a local person I met on the street to share their perspectives. All of them said, no one dies on the streets in Cuba. So I'm going to share this with you guys as well. This is firsthand recounting of their experience in Cuba. So ultimately, this has to do with a systemic issue. Homelessness is not an individual problem. It is a systemic problem. You cannot solve systemic problems with individual solutions. And we're constantly told it is you have to be the solution to it individually for a systemic problem. No, we have to come together. What are some of the ways that we can do this? Some of the ways we can do this is by joining organizations that are doing work on the ground to help the unhoused and helping us to build dual power so that we can reorient the system or create a new system so that people do not have to experience this. We build worker solidarity. We build community with other people so that we can be able to usher forth a new system so that people do not have to experience being unhoused anymore. Because ultimately, that's what it's about. Now, there are organizations in Central Florida like Rio Orlando. They're doing great work on the ground. People's Free Kitchen as well. You have organizations like Food Not Bombs. You can also go and assist them in what they're doing on the ground there. There are also tenants unions, right, that are doing work on the ground to prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place. I encourage you all to get on with tenants unions as well, if you can, to help people so that they can prevent them from becoming homeless. These are some of the things that can be done. And the thing is that it just is up to us to search them out and then do these things. There are organizations like Strive Pensacola that focus on getting housing for LGBTQ, more emphasis on transgender youth and people so that they can have housing as well, because it's very important. There are many different resources out there which we can help and assist with to help either prevent homelessness or to help those who are already unhoused so that they may be able to get out of the situation, or we can build dual power so that we can change the system so that we can stop homelessness in its tracks. That's what we can do. And so I think that's what's important, because we are constantly battling against this system. And the best way to fight homelessness is to fight the people that use it as a tool to exploit, to keep us in check, as it were. Because in reality, everyone by default deserves housing. And I'm not saying it has to be some big elaborate housing, but something so that people can have a stable place to live. Not shelter, housing. There's a difference. Shelter is something temporary. Shelter is something that doesn't give people a sense of belonging. They don't give them the sense of, I'm home. This is my space. Shelter doesn't do that. This is why it's important to provide housing. Now, just to let everybody know, the housing crisis is going to grow. Right now, here it is from Yahoo News. Baby boomers in America are becoming homeless at a rate not seen since the Great Depression. A lot of our parents are now becoming homeless at an exponential rate. We have to be the answer to stop this madness. And we can do it. And we can also do things by supporting ballot initiatives that take away the criminalization of homelessness away out of the power of our state legislators. There are options for things like public banks, right? I talk about all these things on my channel. There are also the options of instituting public banks so that they can build, maybe they could possibly build housing first structures so that we can make sure that people are no longer out on the streets, so that they can actually have housing first, so that they can get themselves to a point where they are more self-sufficient and have a better quality of life. And it can help build that infrastructure without even increasing the taxes, the state, municipal and state taxes on people. That's also another option. Being able to feed and clothe homeless people without it being criminalized, like in places like here in Orlando, like we can't legally just go out there and feed homeless people. We'll get arrested, or we may get fined or ticketed. So also pay attention to things like ballot initiatives as well. Even if you don't vote for people, that's fine. But pay attention to the ballot initiatives that are going on within your respective states. So, I wanted to make sure I covered as much of this as possible so that people get the full scope of what's going on. Be mindful of your neighbors who are unhoused. They need us and we need them.